Before we begin, ask yourself a question no one ever dared to ask you out loud. How many times have you been knocked down by life and pretended you were fine just to keep going? How many moments did you feel yourself breaking inside while the world expected you to stay strong? Today, something shifts. Today is not about surviving the storm. It's about becoming the kind of person the storm cannot break. In this video, you will uncover what most people spend their entire lives searching for without ever finding. The inner architecture of a mind that becomes stronger with chaos instead of collapsing under it. That's why you should already leave your like now, not out of habit, but because this might be the first step you take toward the version of yourself that the world thought you could never become. And you must stay until the end, because the truth that separates the fragile from the antifragile does not reveal itself in the first minute. It reveals itself only to those who are disciplined enough to absorb every detail. Some will watch this video and remain the same, but a few will walk away different, sharper, unshakable. And the difference between them won't be luck. It will be the fact that they were here, watching, listening, transforming from the inside out. Right on this channel. Why do some souls grow stronger with chaos while others break into dust at the slightest touch of fate? This question haunts every moment of our existence, shadowing victories and failures alike, whispering in the silence after every storm. We stand on the battlefield of life, wounded by disappointment and betrayed by our own emotions. Yet something inside us knows that our scars might not be punishments, but invitations. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that the impediment to action advances action. But what if this truth is not only about resilience, but about becoming something beyond resilience, something that feeds on adversity instead of fearing it? We watch ourselves crumble under anger, fear, and frustration, and we wonder whether the collapse is inevitable. But imagine if every emotional blow, every loss, every rejection did not drain us, but enriched us. That is the paradox. Fragility grows in comfort, but power grows in discomfort. Seneca reminded us, fire tests gold. Suffering tests brave men, and in that statement hides the blueprint for transformation. To become antifragile is not to resist pain, but to welcome it as a sculptor that carves us sharper. Yet most run from the sculptor because the hammer terrifies them. Our emotions become our masters when we choose to obey them instead of observe them. The Stoics did not kill emotion, they mastered the space between impulse and action. In that space lives absolute freedom, the crown that cannot be stolen by hardship. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." A warning disguised as wisdom. We chase external victories while losing internal battles, believing success comes from control over the world, when true power comes from control over ourselves. Without this mastery, chaos destroys. With it, chaos becomes fuel. Imagine every misfortune, every insult, every disappointment, adding new armor instead of inflicting a new wound. That is the architecture of an antifragile spirit. We do not become strong by avoiding storms. We become strong by navigating them without sacrificing our center. Confidence that depends on circumstance is merely a costume, but the confidence born from inner discipline is a fortress. It does not tremble when the world trembles. It does not collapse when others abandon us or when the future becomes uncertain. It stands unshakable, not because fate is kind, but because it no longer needs fate to be kind. There is a moment, the moment before reaction, where time freezes for anyone who seeks greatness. In that instant, we can choose whether pain will refine us or consume us. Most surrender to instinct, and this surrender is what turns suffering into weakness. But when we hold that burning sensation in the chest and simply observe it without kneeling to it, something ancient awakens inside us. We realize we are not a slave to what we feel. We realize we can decide who commands the throne inside the mind. That is the seed of anti-fragility. If life repeatedly breaks us at the same points, it is not evidence of fate as cruelty, but evidence that those points are where our discipline is missing. We do not fear difficulties because they hurt. We fear them because they reveal the truth about us. And that is why the question echoes once more. Why do some souls grow stronger with chaos while others break? The answer waits in the shadows, forming shape piece by piece, and soon it will reveal itself in full. But to see it, we must first walk further into the darkness without fear. We search for strength in silence, yet few understand that silence itself is a battlefield. Inside the quiet, our fears speak loudest, reminding us of failures, regrets, memories we wish we could burn. But running from them only strengthens them. The true disciple of inner mastery stands still and listens not to surrender, but to understand the enemy. Just as Epictetus declared, character is destiny, we discover that every reaction, every decision, every moment of restraint carves our destiny more than any external force ever could. Chaos outside is powerless if discipline inside remains unshaken, and it is only through the flames of discomfort that discipline is forged, not granted. We do not rise by chance. We rise by deliberate endurance, by choosing growth over relief, meaning over comfort, self-command over emotional surrender. We live in a world that worships urgency, where emotions demand immediate expression, where impulses disguise themselves as authenticity. But authenticity without mastery is merely chaos, wearing a crown. The Stoics understood that calm is not the absence of emotion, it is the refusal to kneel before it. When we stand firm in the middle of fear, our breath becomes a shield. When we refuse to retaliate in anger, our silence becomes a sword. And when we control our desires instead of chasing them blindly, we walk not as victims of life, but as sculptors of our own spirit. There is a strength that cannot be taken by insult, loss, humiliation, or misfortune, the strength of someone who has stopped negotiating with their emotions. This is the beginning of antifragility. We do not become unbreakable by hiding from the world. We become unbreakable by facing it with a mind trained for war. Seneca warned that difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body, but modern hearts fear the weight of effort. We want the rewards without the struggle, the wisdom without the wounds. Yet every step away from hardship makes us more fragile, not safer. A life cushioned by ease produces a spirit that shatters at the first touch of adversity. But a life willingly exposed to challenge produces a spirit that grows from every impact. We must remember, the storm that frightens us is the same storm that forms us. The athlete grows through resistance, the warrior grows through battle, and the soul grows through suffering, if suffering is not wasted. When we look back on the moments that shaped us, we notice something striking. None of them were comfortable. None of them were easy. None of them were painless. But they were necessary. Every breakthrough was once a breakdown. Every victory was once a defeat that refused to stay defeated. We stand here today not because life was gentle, but because something within us refused to disappear. And yet, the earlier question still lingers in the air like a ghost. Why do some souls grow stronger with chaos while others break? The answer is close, and soon the veil will fall. But before it does, we must confront one final truth within ourselves. The truth that separates the fragile from the There comes a moment in every life when the world stops protecting us, when comfort dissolves and our illusions collapse, and in that moment we discover that we were never fighting fate, we were fighting ourselves. We feared pain not because it was unbearable, but because it exposed how unprepared we were. We feared loss not because we couldn't survive without what was taken, but because we had built our identity on things that were never ours. The fragile curse their misfortune, but the antifragile study it. They dissect their emotions like soldiers analyzing enemy tactics, asking not why is this happening to me, but how can this shape me? This mentality does not numb the heart, it strengthens it. Musonius Rufus taught that the greatest victories are victories over the self, and in that truth we uncover the doorway. Antifragility is born the moment we stop craving a universe that protects us and start training for a universe that tests us. To live antifragile is to sharpen ourselves through every experience, whether brutal or beautiful, without surrendering to bitterness. We cannot fear discomfort and expect greatness. A blade that refuses the hammer remains dull. A soul that avoids adversity remains weak. When we embrace adversity, not with desperation but with discipline, we transform every wound into a weapon. The Stoics did not seek suffering, but they did not run from it either. They faced it with a calm that terrified even their enemies. Because a person who welcomes challenge becomes unstoppable. Epictetus, who began as a slave and ended as a master of the mind, proved that circumstances do not decide who we become, our responses do. If injustice made him wiser, if pain made him calmer, then pain and injustice themselves became building blocks rather than chains. That is the secret few dare to accept. The forces that once tried to break us can become the forces that build us. The path to such transformation is not mystical or poetic, it is painfully practical. It means waking each day ready to confront emotions rather than obey them. It means observing anger before expressing it, questioning desire before pursuing it, understanding fear before acting on it. It means training the mind like a warrior trains the body, because without the discipline of thought, even the strongest collapse under pressure. Aurelius ruled an empire while commanding himself more strictly than any army. Seneca spoke of wealth while practicing detachment from everything he owned. Epictetus taught freedom while wearing chains. These were not contradictions, they were demonstrations. They showed us that strength is not forged by privilege but by internal order. When the mind refuses to bow to chaos, chaos becomes a sparring partner, not a predator. And now, the question from the beginning returns not as a riddle, but as a revelation. Why do some souls grow stronger with chaos while others break? Because chaos does not create fragility or antifragility, it merely reveals it. Those who depend on comfort are shattered when comfort disappears. But those who train through discomfort evolve every time comfort is taken. We are not shaped by what happens to us, but by the stance we take toward what happens. The antifragile spirit grows not because life is gentle, but because it has chosen to stop expecting gentleness. We do not stand unbroken because storms avoid us, we stand unbroken because we become the kind of force storms cannot bend. And once that realization enters the soul, fear dissolves. We no longer run from the fire. We walk through it knowing each step makes us sharper. If you are ready, we continue deeper into this path, toward the final transformation. To cross the final threshold of antifragility, we must confront the most uncomfortable truth of all. The enemy has never been the world, the people around us, or the disasters that struck our lives. The enemy has always been the version of ourselves that refuses to evolve. Every time we blamed fate, lashed out in anger, collapsed under pressure, or surrendered to despair. We fed the weakness that lived inside us. But weakness is not permanent unless we protect it. A warrior who protects his wounds never heals. A warrior who exposes them to discipline becomes untouchable. When Seneca stated, "A gem cannot be polished without friction," he wasn't describing beauty, he was describing identity. The person we wish to become does not arrive gently. It emerges through endurance, through self-governance, through the refusal to break even when breaking seems easier. Anti-fragility is earned, not gifted. To live this way is to rewrite the relationship with hardship forever. From this moment on, every setback becomes a resource. Every insult becomes training. Every failure becomes information. Life ceases to be a battlefield of survival and becomes an arena of refinement. We no longer pray for easier circumstances. We prepare for difficult ones. We no longer beg for good luck. We build the capacity to handle misfortune. With each challenge faced without emotional surrender, our strength compounds. With each rejection accepted without self-destruction, our worth becomes self-generated. And with each loss endured without losing ourselves, we become incapable of being owned by the world. This is where power becomes quiet, where confidence becomes invisible, where mastery becomes natural. We do not need to prove strength when we embody it. Eventually, something extraordinary happens. We stop needing control over life because we no longer fear what life can do to us. There is freedom in that, a freedom unimaginable to the fragile. A person who fears nothing cannot be manipulated, cannot be broken, cannot be derailed. This is not arrogance, it is sovereignty. The Stoics knew that the greatest empire is a territory within. When we master that territory, external victories become mere consequences of internal order. Discipline becomes peace, restraint becomes clarity, courage becomes instinct. And then, we finally understand that the greatest privilege is not living an easy life, but living a life that no difficulty can defeat. At this stage, we do not merely survive adversity, we benefit from it. Every strike sharpens, every loss strengthens. Every storm feeds the fire rather than extinguishes it. And now, at the end of this journey, the question that began everything arrives once again, not as doubt, but as confirmation. Why do some souls grow stronger with chaos, while others break into dust? Because the world does not decide that outcome, we do. Chaos is only a mirror. Some see their fears in it and collapse. Others see their potential in it and rise. The fragile hope, the storm never returns. The antifragile prepare to meet it again, stronger than before. That is the difference. That is the answer that waited in the shadows. We do not become immune to pain, we become beyond pain. We do not avoid the fire, we learn to burn brighter. And one day, without realizing when it happened, we become the very force that once terrified us. Even after the flames of transformation die down, a deeper silence emerges, the silence not of rest, but of awakening. It is the moment after battle when we no longer ask, "Will I survive the next challenge?" but instead whisper, "How much further can I evolve?" Strength once felt like a distant mountain, but now it feels like a staircase visible only as we climb it, one step appearing only after mastering the previous one. The antifragile spirit does not remain still. It seeks greater pressure, not recklessly, but intentionally, knowing that the soul expands in proportion to the weight it accepts. Marcus Aurelius warned that to live is to be thrown into constant conflict, yet the fragile spend their lives searching for peace outside rather than building peace inside. We discover now that peace without power is an illusion, while peace forged through power is unshakable. As we reflect on the path we walked, we understand that every disappointment we once cursed became the very fuel that elevated us. Pain was not the obstacle, it was the architect. Fear was not the cog, it was the forge. Loss was not the destruction, it was the chiseling of everything unnecessary. We do not desire an easy life anymore, because we have tasted something better, mastery. And once mastery enters the soul, comfort becomes a distraction, and purpose becomes oxygen. We watch the world continue to chase validation and pleasure, like thirsty wanderers chasing mirages, and we feel no temptation to join them, not out of superiority, but out of clarity. We have learned to drink from a different well, the well that cannot dry, the well of demand. We are no longer shaped by what we experience, we shape ourselves through how we respond. And as this realization grows, our identity shifts once again, not toward arrogance, but toward responsibility. If strength can be built, then weakness can be eliminated. If discipline can be trained, then chaos can become nourishment. The antifragile path never ends, it simply ascends. Yet there is one truth we have not spoken aloud until now: the world needs people who refuse to break. Not for glory, not for recognition, but because every generation inherits storms it did not choose. When we rise, we do not rise alone. Our resilience becomes a torch for those still trapped in the dark. There is a silent brotherhood, a quiet sisterhood, among those who endure with dignity. When one human stands unbroken in the face of adversity, others remember that such strength is possible. Epictetus said, "Difficulties show what men are, and when we show what we are, we grant others permission to become more than they are." This is the hidden purpose of antifragility, not merely to withstand chaos, but to transform it into wisdom we can pass forward. We do not preach, we demonstrate. We do not boast, we embody. Our calm teaches more than words ever could. Our discipline inspires more than speeches. Our courage reshapes the ground others walk on. Even our scars speak a language the suffering can understand. And as we carry this invisible responsibility, our power reaches its highest form, not domination, not control, but leadership by example. The fragile wait for the world to change. The antifragile change themselves, and the world follows. That is why we continue, not because life demands it, but because someone must stand where others fall. Someone must prove that chaos is not the executioner, is the invitation. And in answering that invitation, we become more than survivors. We become guides, forces of nature, living proof that the human spirit is not meant to shatter but to evolve. The journey does not end not because we are incomplete, but because the climb is what keeps us alive. The question that once haunted us does not haunt us anymore. We no longer ask why some souls break while others grow stronger. We know, we have lived the answer. And now, we carry it not as a shield, not as a weapon, but as a torch.